weekly agenda. All right, so we're kind of talking about favorite Pokemon, obviously, because I thought that would be a fun one when I was looking up, what is today? It's National What? And I saw Pokemon Day, so I thought that would be fun. So before we start our new module, our new unit, which is 8, let's talk a little bit about the Module 7 DBQ. So I had a lot of people requesting for me to share the document with you. Guys, we do not share documents with students, okay? We just don't. I asked you guys both on Wednesday and Thursday during the live meet because for whatever reason that's going on, I'm not sure what the issue is. It was not letting me give you the one that I had. The only difference between the document that I was using and the document that's found in the course arc, the one that I asked you guys to use, I reminded you both Wednesday and Thursday to use that one, is the document that I had, I just added something to the bottom that was just a reminder that that's where I wanted you to put your essay, your 3 to 5 paragraph essay. And so there was no difference in the documents other than I had added that extra reminder, even though I reminded you guys, on Wednesday, and then I reminded you guys on Thursday during our live meet, which is in the videos, to make sure that you did a 3 to 5 paragraph essay. Remember on Thursday, we wrote our thesis statement. Well, you should have written your thesis statement. And then we went through and we decided which documents would work with which side of the argument. So we kind of, divvied them up, if you will. And then I had a few kiddos come to the small group meet who were a little confused on Friday, which is exactly what the small group meet was. But I had a lot of emails from students. I've also seen a lot of documents where you guys didn't write an essay. A paragraph is not an essay. 2 sentences is not an essay. So you got minimum math, because not only did I ask you guys and remind you guys to write a 3 to 5 paragraph essay, but your rubric, remember the thing that you're supposed to use before you turn in your journals, because the rubric tells you exactly how I'm going to grade it. It has that on there for the essay. And you guys were not writing essays. So what you got was a minimum F. And then I asked you to please follow the directions and write your essay and then resubmit it for a passing grade. The DBQ is going to close this Friday. So if you turned in your DBQ this weekend, you need to go and look and see what grade you made. And yes, Ryan, you did fine. But a lot of kiddos did not. So I reassigned a whole lot of DBQs back because you guys did not do your essays correctly or even write an essay. So I need you to go back, look at what it says, correct it, and then resubmit it so you can get a passing grade. Okay? Use the rubric. I know maybe I didn't stress that enough last week, but guys, I use the rubric when I grade your journals. You need to use the rubric and look at it before you turn your journals in. It's not just when I give you the information and I go through it. Before you actually turn it in, you need to use the rubric as well. That way you will already know, hey, I did this. Oh, wait, I didn't do this. And then you'll kind of have a better idea. The Module 7 quiz, if you have not taken it yet, it is closing tomorrow, 2/28. Remember, that is also a summative. So your DBQ with essay as a summative grade, your Module 7 quiz, that is also a summative grade. Okay, so that's 2 summative grades that you guys need to take care of. Are there any questions about that before we go into Module 8? Taj, you're okay? All right. No questions? Okay. All right. So, tomorrow afternoon is our small group meets. Remember, Tuesdays, our small group meets, 12:30 to 2:30, MVLA, rate their SSG. Guys, that's the small group code that we've been using since we went to this Tuesday, Friday, when we had the change up on them. It's always in our things the day before on our agendas. It's always in the announcements on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then it's always in the remind text messages. So if you want to join up with the small group meets, look at our announcements, check the remind text message just to make sure. Okay. All right. So today we're going to start module 8, which is change over time. And kind of it's going to follow the same routine that we've been doing, where we start out with Europe, then we move into Asia, and then we move to Africa, and then we finally finish up with Australia and the Pacific. All right. So if you guys can open up your module 8 lesson 1 course arc, if you could get that one open. I do not think we're going to get to the journal questions yet today, because they're the Google tours and a writing, and I don't think we're going to quite get to there, because whatever we don't finish today, we will finish up on Wednesday. Okay, so if you guys could open that up really quickly, give everybody a chance. So while you guys are opening it up, I'm just going to go over our objectives and the standards. So examine how ideas and technologies led to major changes in Europe. Identify various times of great change in Europe. So obviously, we're going to be talking about the age of discovery. We're going to be talking about the Renaissance. We're going to be talking about just this idea of, good, yay. Okay, we're going to be talking about this idea of, culture spreading. We're going to talk about different innovations that have led to, like technological innovations, cultural innovations, that without those having happened back then, we wouldn't have some of the things that we have today. Okay, so it's investigate cultural developments within and across human societies with attention to their belief system, philosophies, ideologies, and the arts, and analyze the impact of technological developments on events, people, and cultures in the ancient world, which is basically what I just said, but I said it in more modern language. Okay. All right. So everybody has theirs open. How about this? I see a couple people say yes. Can you guys give me the thumbs up reaction if you've got your course arc open? Seeing some. All right. Some more is popping up. All right. Okie dokie. All right. So let's go into the introduction. So it says, in comparison to many parts of the world, the United States is fairly young, okay? Nearly 400 years now. And even in those 400 years, we have seen change. Imagine parts of the world that have been inhabited for thousands of years. What changes might they have witnessed? In this lesson, we'll examine some of the changes in Europe and how they may have impacted them and other parts of the world, which makes sense, right? When all year long, we've been talking about the Eastern Hemisphere, right? Everything that, happens, whether it's in Asia, the Middle East, which is technically still part of Asia, Africa, Europe, all of those things have eventually made their way over into the Western Hemisphere, but we're concentrating, right, on the Eastern Hemisphere. So let's look at some of our vocabulary. So some of these words we've talked about before. We're just going to kind of come back to them. So we have the Renaissance, right? And it was after, the time period when everything was, we had the plague, we had the Middle Ages, we had a lot of things going on. So the Renaissance in the 1400s comes along, and we have this rebirth. And that's kind of what Renaissance means. It's like a rebirth of culture and learning, okay? The printing press, talk about a major technological advancement that literally springboarded so many things. Remember we said a rebirth of learning? Well, with the printing press and them, actually doing the first book, Guggenheim Bible, And then being able to, instead of handwriting, in calligraphy, now they could do much more, like pamphlets and books and newspapers, and people are going to learn how to read, and things are going to spread further and faster. And we have the printing press to thank for that, right? The Reformation, and this would be the Protestant Reformation, is what they are talking about. So up until this point, when we're talking Christianity, we're talking the Catholic Church. That was the major organized church, if you will, when we're talking Christianity for so many years. And a gentleman by the name of Martin Luther, a priest, doesn't like some of the things that are going on in the church. He questions it. He lists 99 grievances, and eventually he splits from the Catholic Church, which then begins what becomes known as the Protestant Reformation. They're protesting and they want reform. And Lutheranism becomes the first Christian offshoot of Catholicism. And that's when we start going into having all these other offshoots that come after that. Circumnavigation, technology improved to allow for explorers to circumnavigate the globe. So being able to, instead of just trying to guess at where the stars were, using more accurate measurements, instead of going, we're going to try going to wherever and taking a wrong turn and going to the wrong place. I mean, don't get me wrong. We do have, some happy circumstances like Columbus trying to make his way to the Indies and the Spice Islands. But instead of, continuing on and around Africa, he made a right-hand turn and made it to the Caribbean, hence the name Indians, for the natives that he found there, right? So we're going to start seeing better navigation. Cultural diffusion, which I have a video that we're going to watch over that. European countries went exploring and colonizing, and this would lead to cultural diffusion, bringing Christianity with them, bringing the foods that they ate with them, bringing the English language with them. And then as they, go to other places, learning about these things, trying new foods, new spices, new drinks, all of those things, and then that they're going to bring back with them. And that's where we start seeing this sharing of culture. Okay, so I think we've gotten through all of that part. So before we go on to the printing press, I'm going to do the video. It's like a 3-minute video on cultural diffusion. Okay, and then we'll come back.
What is cultural diffusion? Broadly construed, cultural diffusion is the spreading out and merging of pieces from different cultures. These different cultures all have many diverse types of food, clothing, and even languages that people love and enjoy every day. More specifically, cultural diffusion is the spread of cultural items, such as ideas, styles, religions, technologies, and languages between individuals, whether within a single culture or from one culture to another. It is distinct from the diffusion of innovations within a specific culture. Examples of diffusion include the spread of the war chariot and iron smelting in ancient times, and the use of automobiles and Western business suits in the 20th century. Types of cultural diffusion. Scholars have identified 5 types of cultural diffusion, namely, expansion diffusion, relocation diffusion, hierarchical diffusion, contagious diffusion, and stimulus diffusion. Expansion diffusion refers to an innovation or idea that develops in a source area and remains strong there, while also spreading outward to other areas. This can include hierarchical, stimulus, and contagious diffusion. Relocation diffusion is an idea or innovation that migrates into new areas, leaving behind its origin or source of the cultural trait. Hierarchical diffusion is an idea or innovation that spreads by moving from larger to smaller places, often with little regard to the distance between places, and often influenced by social elites. Contagious diffusion is an idea or innovation that spreads based on person-to-person contact within a given population with no regard for hierarchies. HIV/AIDS first spread to urban neighborhoods, that is, hierarchical diffusion, and then spread outwards, that is, contagious diffusion. Stimulus diffusion is an idea or innovation that spreads based on its attachment to another concept. It occurs when a certain idea is rejected, but the underlying concept is adopted. For example, early Siberian people domesticated reindeer only after exposure to the domesticated cattle raised by cultures to their south. They had no use for cattle, but the idea of domesticated herds appealed to them, and they began domesticating reindeer, an animal they had long hunted.
Amazon offers prepaid tuition for college, GED, and ESL programs.
All right, so that's just kind of Jameson. The southern cities, it's not so much that it was the southern cities. You have to remember it's the well, at that point, the time the jazz came around, that we would have started calling them African Americans, right? Because they were Americans by that point. But yeah, I mean, yes and no, because with jazz, you're adding in musical instruments that were not a part of what they use in Africa or the Caribbean. So it's a blend of the musical beats and adding in like musical instruments that you found here. Jazz is like a fusion. It's a fusion of African beats, Caribbean culture, and then instruments used here in the United States. So that's why birthplace of jazz here in the United States is because it's that mixture of all of them. Yeah. Popularity of sushi, especially if you look along the West Coast, because you have everybody that came over from Japan into Washington, Oregon, and California brought that in there. Absolutely. So, yep. All right. So now let's go back. Let's do the vocabulary. All right. So the revival of art and literature under the influence of classical models. What is that one, guys? Very good. Renaissance. Is that what you're going to say, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay. Second one, printing press.
Printing press.
Okay. Third one, the reform of abuses of the Catholic Church.
Reformation.
Yep, there we go. Sailor travel around the globe.
Circumnavigation.
And then cultural diffusion, right? Does everybody have that?
Yes.
All right. Give everybody a chance. All right, can we move on to the next page? You guys have all gotten these down? Yes? Okay. I'm not sure why we're missing that on there. Let's see, is the video gonna... Not sure why it's doing that. Hang on. Hold on just a second. I'm trying to find the actual... Okay, here we go. No, that's the wrong one.
Now, score 40% off spring floral.
All right, so we're gonna watch the video on the printing press and then we'll come back and answer the
Hundreds of
questions.
spring must-haves. Plus, earn up to 6% in Michael's rewards on every purchase. Hurry, sale ends March 11th.
This is a printing press. Historians argue that a printing press is one of the most revolutionary inventions in human history. With it you could spread knowledge and ideas like never before. Something that is often overlooked is its economic impact on the world, and it also provides a great historical parallel to the emergence of the internet. It can even teach us about how future information technology innovations could impact the world. The so-called movable type printing press was not named the movable type because it was easy to move. It was actually really heavy. It got that name because this type of printing press uses movable blocks, usually with letters on them, that you could construct documents with. The movable type printing press was developed by Johannes Gutenberg and his business partners in Mainz, Germany, around 1450. Printing started off as a for-profit enterprise for them. Their printing press could have taken inspiration from earlier ones from China, but the small number of alphabetic characters needed for European languages was an important factor that made it more successful and gave it the ability to have a faster spread in European countries than it had in China with its thousands of unique characters. Having the movable blocks made of metal made them more durable and the lettering became more uniform, which opened a door for the wonderful world of typography and fonts. The printing press may be regarded as one of the key factors fostering the Renaissance due to its effectiveness. Its use spread around the globe. But that spread didn't happen instantly. The key innovation in printing, the process of how to make the metal blocks, was kept a trade secret by Gutenberg and his business partners. The first known blueprint of how to make the movable type printing press first came out almost a century after it was first introduced. So for a long time, they were the main producers of Europe's printing presses. They had a printing press monopoly. Because they were not being produced very quickly and they were difficult to transport, it took time for it to spread outwards. What you could see from this slow adoption of the printing press was that the cities that got the printing press saw much higher economic growth than the cities that did not. Cities that adopted the printing press lowered their cost of written material such as books, which led to some growth. Now it was not only the elite and the rich who could afford books, but so could the poor. The printing press also spawned the newspaper industry we know today, but the printing press also gave rise to a lot more growth than that. Cities that adopted the printing press also experienced what is called positive spillovers in both human capital accumulation and technological change, meaning that more people moved to the cities and technologies got more advanced in those cities. Similar spillover effects can be seen with the spread of the internet in countries today. The printing press attracted paper mills, students, translators and schools to the cities it spread to. It also created new jobs for the people handling the printers and made it much cheaper to transmit ideas over distances. Before the industrial era, commerce and trading was a more important source of wealth and income than industrial production. This new printed media played an important role in helping traders to become better. For example, the printing presses produced a stream of math textbooks used by students preparing for careers in business. The first known of these mathematical textbooks is the Trevisa Arithmetic from 1478. This one and hundreds of similar texts helped students become better at calculating exchange rates, profit shares, and interest rates. It helped spread literacy and cutting-edge business practices such as bookkeeping. It also advanced professions such as merchants, lawyers, officials, doctors, and teachers. All of this together meant that cities with printing presses experienced a huge amount of economic growth, and it became one of the greatest revolutions in information technology. European cities became centers for ideas and business practices that drove the transition into our modern economic growth.
Get energized at Planet Fitness. Join for zero enrollment and then only $10 a month.
Building your online business?
All right, so let's go back. All right, so it's talking about knowledge from books. Obviously, really, I know YouTube's getting very comfortable with those ads. So prior to the printing press, you had to be able to read like calligraphy, right? The very fancy type of writing. A lot of people, if they were literate, a lot harder to read. So the printing press made it easier for knowledge to be reproduced and like spread, right? No, Adriel, they do not anymore. So when we're talking about like, what are all the things that are related to the printing press? Well, books become cheaper, which means more people can afford them, which means more people are going to read. It's no longer just an oral history, because, you know, as you're telling stories, stories change, right? From one person to another to another. If you guys ever played telephone in class, you start at one end of the classroom, somebody starts by saying one thing, and by the time you make it to the other end, right, it's completely different. Same thing with like oral history or oral storytelling, right? But in books, obviously, as it's put down, it's printed out, it stays, correct? You have a way to spread new ideas. So, you know, we're talking about when the Enlightenment comes. Local languages, easier to write in the local languages. And then, of course, the part that the church doesn't like is where everybody starts questioning what the Catholic Church is saying, and the ideas of Reformation are spreading throughout Europe. Okay. So prior to the printing press, who would copy books? Who did all the writing? What do we call those people? Scribes. Very good. Okay. And then what year was the printing press invented? Good. 1436. All right. Due to the printing press, the cost of books would drop. Good. And which of the following are results of the printing press? All but the people stopped reading. Good. All right. Does everybody have those completed on your course arc?
Yes.
Hey, Ryan says yes. Taj, Adriel,
Yes.
Angeline. All right. All right. So the Renaissance. So we know Renaissance means rebirth, right? Okay. So 14th to 17th century is the time period when we're talking about this explosion in arts, in literature, in scientific thought. This is where we go from, you know, Earth is the center to the sun is the center, which was considered heresy with the church. The idea of, you know, questioning what people were saying. A lot of that it begins during the Renaissance time period. We also have humanism beginning to flourish. The idea that man was the center of their universe and they should work towards human achievements. Things in education, in arts, literature, science. All of those things start taking place during the Renaissance. And I think, all right, open up the link, right? So then we're talking about some of the more famous individuals. So of course, Leonardo da Vinci, absolute Renaissance man, right? Architect, inventor, painter, scientist, especially when he starts being able to draw out like the human body and the human system. Erasmus, he's the one who started translating books into like Greek from Latin. We have Rene Descartes. He was mathematician, philosopher. Galileo, astronomer. Copernicus, mathematician and astronomer. He's the guy who came up with that, hey, maybe the sun is the center of the universe, not Earth. Hobbes, he is a philosopher. He starts talking about belief systems and what government should do for the people. Chaucer is a poet. Dante starts talking about heaven and hell. Machiavelli starts talking about what we should do, and he doesn't take it as like man should be good. He kind of takes a like slightly different level. We have Titian, which is the painter. John Milton, he wrote Paradise Lost. Shakespeare, which you guys should all know. Donatello, another sculptor. Raphael, Michelangelo. No, I'm not talking about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but yes, that's where they got their names from. So these are all really famous people from that time period. So let's go back. So during the Renaissance, what became the center of the universe? It was man, right? All right, so Galileo. What did Galileo do? If he's an astronomer, yes, Ryan?
He discovered more moons on Jupiter.
There you go. The moon's on Jupiter. What about Chaucer? Okay, I'm glad you're back, Gabriel. So, Ryan? So we know literature, right? Who can
Yeah.
tell me, like, is it Canterbury Tales or, okay, yep. Canterbury Tales. And then, of course, Dante would be the Divine Comedy, right? Does everybody have that? All right, so which of the following were inventions of the Renaissance time period?
Clock, telescope, and the scientific method.
There you go. All right, does everybody have that done? Yeah? Are we good? All right, so let's move on to the age of discovery. So we started talking about the things that would help them, like circumnavigation. So of course we have, you know, drawing maps. We're going to talk about different things that came about during that time period. I do have a video that I'm going to show you guys first, and then we're going to come back and look at the vocabulary and then the notes that are on here. So give me just a moment.
Is brought to you by Captivating History. The fall of Constantinople in May of 1453 marks a turning point in European history. The Ottomans went from formidable adversaries to a dominant power in one fell swoop. Control of southwestern Europe meant that they could use their navy to capitalize on maritime trade across the region. With their economies dwindling and authorities challenged, European kingdoms were looking for novel ways to eke out a living and, if possible, tip the balance of power in their favor. Necessity breeds creativity. The European powers wanted to bypass the Ottomans and play by their own rules. Thus began a series of expeditions and voyages to chart remote lands, going where no European had dared to go before, and discovering civilizations hitherto unknown. This adventure began as a great European experiment, but eventually turned into a calculated system of exploitation and polarization across the globe. This is the Age of Discovery. Let's travel back to 15th century Portugal, where a prince named Henry, or as he later came to be known, Prince Henry the Navigator, encouraged exploration across the Mediterranean southern shore. He is often regarded as the progenitor of the Age of Discovery. By the mid-15th century, the Portuguese had started to make great strides in navigational technology. Technologies like astrolabes, magnetic compasses, the caravel, and sextant further helped fuel the passion for exploration. This passion manifested itself in the European desire to head into Africa. Africans were rich in food, gold, and slaves, as exemplified by the Malian king's Hajj to Mecca in the years 1324 to 1325. Moving along the coastline, the Portuguese started to kidnap African locals to sell into European slave markets. In 1488, another Portuguese explorer, Bartolomeu Dias, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, one of the southernmost points of the African continent, essentially paving the way for the establishment of sea routes between Europe and Asia. Now that reaching the Indian Ocean was not an issue, another Portuguese explorer, Vasco da Gama, made his way from Lisbon to Calcutta in India. The goods used in China and Southeast Asia were fascinating to European eyes, and they quickly developed a liking to the different luxuries of the continent. And with that, Portuguese colonization was well underway. In Africa, they had developed fortresses and trading posts along the coastline. They established their presence in Asia by capturing Goa and Malacca. The former served as their main base for almost 4 centuries. By controlling trade routes across the coastline and avoiding Mediterranean routes and, consequently, the Arabian Peninsula, Portugal turned from a poor kingdom into one of the richest countries of its time. In the late 15th century, a young Italian man by the name of Christopher Columbus was living in Lisbon. He had a keen interest in geography, astronomy, and history. The aura of exploration attracted him, and the idea of traveling to Southeast Asia through the Cape route became more and more appealing to him. When his efforts in Portugal failed, he lobbied in multiple kingdoms to sponsor his voyage. The Catholic monarchs in Spain agreed to fund his travels, and he finally set sail. In 1492, he landed on an island in the Bahamas, now called San Salvador, where he captured a handful of slaves. Word of the discovery quickly spread throughout Europe. No one knew the size and shape of the American land, so ambitious sailors took to the seas after Columbus, exploring the American land from one end to the other. The English were trailing in the search for new lands, so Henry VII in England arranged for an Italian navigator, John Cabot, to find a course for Japan from the west. In 1497, Cabot set off from Bristol and reached modern-day Canada. The British finally had a foothold in the Americas. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer, led the Spanish expedition to the East Indies, during which he circumnavigated the globe. By achieving this substantial feat, he discovered the interoceanic passage connecting the Atlantic to Asia. After discovering the straits in South America in 1520, he sailed across the Pacific and was killed by Philippine locals in 1521. Most of Europe now had access to both Asia and the Americas. Pre-Columbian America was a vastly different land than the Europeans had ever imagined, mostly because of 2 major civilizations. The Aztec Empire, a kingdom of abundant wealth and superstition, had controlled most of Mesoamerica since 1325 CA. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés landed on the coast of present-day Mexico and started moving inland. He allied himself with some indigenous factions and massacred and plundered others. His exhibition was recalled, but Hernán chose to ignore the warning. The governor of Cuba even sent emissaries to arrest Hernán, but his troops, along with the indigenous tribes, fought and won. He married a local woman named Dona Marina, who proved pivotal in the conquest that followed. He finally reached Tenochtitlan, the center of the Aztec Empire, where the Spaniards gawked and gaped at the wonder of the New World. After he defeated the Aztec Empire, his prestige grew, and the charges of mutiny were removed. In South America, Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro was leading a campaign against the Incas. The Incan Empire was based in the Andes Mountain of central Peru, and was a large empire of around 16 million people that extended around 2,500 miles from north to south. The Incas had built 1,000 miles of roads and facilitated transport and commerce within the empire. In his third expedition to Peru in 1532, he captured the Incan emperor and executed him. With the appearance of Europeans, diseases also started to spread, especially diseases that were alien to the immune systems of the locals. Historians estimate that disease and conquest wiped out about 90% of the Native American population. Iberian conquests begot conflicts between Portugal and Spain, and the Pope had to sign a treaty to settle the disputes. Spain received the better end of the deal, but other nations, including France, Netherlands, and England, refused to acknowledge the treaty. In the late 1570s, Francis Drake initiated the British incursion into the Pacific Ocean and, by doing so, gave birth to conflict in the western coast of the continent. He also managed to circumnavigate the world and received a knighthood for the accomplishment. What started as a search for new lands and resources had taken quite a nasty turn. By the beginning of the 17th century, European nations had taken a liking to the idea of colonization and exploitation of the rest of the world. By chipping away at the ends of the ends, they slowly changed the face of modern politics and economics. Whereas Africa was wealthy and majestic before Western involvement, it was a home to poverty, slavery, and death after it. Similarly, the New World witnessed a perpetuated mass genocide of the Native Americans. The Aztec and Incan empires were among several civilizations the colonizers wiped out. The African slave trade continued to destroy the lives of African generations as they were subjected to inhumane treatment in America long after the British retreated from the colonies. Over the years, indigenous scholars have taken issue with the use of the word discovery for the sake of periodization, since it negates the presence of indigenous civilizations. In Asia, the British East India Trading Company and the Dutch East India Company entered Indonesia, Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Indian subcontinent. Dividing people across religious and discriminatory lines was often the core policy of imperialism. The Spanish did it in the Americas, where they pit local groups against each other. Similarly, the motto of the British East India Company was divide and conquer, which they used to pit different religious factions in the Indian subcontinent against each other. India eventually partitioned along religious lines in the 20th century. The Age of Discovery has essentially formed the backbone of the modern world. Its effects are far-reaching and far more potent than you may think. The idea of a poor Africa or a rich Europe did not exist before it, yet it defines the spectrum of modern geography and politics. Racism, intense religiosity, and a distrust of the West are all remnants of a bygone era. Lenin famously called imperialism the highest stage of capitalism. The Age of Discovery was an exciting time for Europe, but navigating history from an indigenous perspective offers nothing but a look at the brutality and callousness of the European discoveries. To learn more about the Age of Discovery, check out our book, The Age of Discovery, a captivating guide to an era of exploration in European history, including discoveries such as Christopher Columbus's voyages to the Americas and Vasco da Gama's sea route to India. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while they're still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.
It's hard to believe Mint's new family plan is just $15 a month per person. So I've asked my wife and plan member to back me up. You're not my wife.
No, I just stand in for her on set during the boring stuff.
The boring stuff. Are you kidding? I'm announcing a family.
This video is brought to you by Cap.
All right, so that takes us through at least some of, let me go back over here, the Age of Discovery, right? So talking about the different time periods. So we're talking about the 1400s. This is when they are all about exploring and looking for new resources, looking for new areas where they can sell the goods that they make. So we have people like Marco Polo. We have Kublai Khan, Magellan. Some of these names should sound familiar. We have talked about some of them. Marco Polo going from, remember, he's the one who went from Europe over to Asia and then brought Asian good bags. And the whole beginning of the Silk Road takes place. The Khans, I mean, pretty much most of the people throughout Asia and into Europe can trace their lineage back to the Khans. Magellan, he's the first one to like circumnavigate the globe. So he's kind of the guy that everybody thinks of. Charles V, he was the Spanish king. And he was the one who really starts pushing, taking Christianity everywhere. Pizarro is a Spanish explorer who actually conquers the Incas. Vasco da Gama is the first European explorer to reach India by sea. And then Vasco da Gama also makes it to what we would later call Florida. Columbus, they say, you know, the Italian explorer, he did not discover the Americas. He was not the first European. He actually, Columbus doesn't even make it to North America per se. He hits the Caribbean islands, part of that area. Cortez, so where when we talk about Pizarro conquering the Incas, Cortez conquered the Aztecs. Montezuma, last Inca or Aztec emperor, all of those. So this is the time period that we're talking about. Okay. Any questions on this portion of it? All right. So let's go through the Age of Discovery. Okay, let's look at some of these. So we just talked about Christopher Columbus. He sailed for Spain, even though he himself was Portuguese. We just talked about Vasco da Gama. He sailed for Portugal. Magellan, he was the dude. So he was trying to find, like, if he headed west, could he make a different route to Asia in going in that direction? He's the one who makes it to South America and then realizes if he goes around the bottom of South America, which then becomes known as the Strait of Magellan, he can make it up to the Pacific Ocean, much like they found that if they went around Africa and they went around the bottom portion of it, that's the Strait of Good Hope, they could make it to the Indian Ocean that way. But they were trying to find quicker routes than having to go all the way around Africa, and that allowed them into the Western Hemisphere, and things are going to come from that. Okay. So this is Magellan's voyage, right? He comes from Spain. He goes around South Africa. He makes it into the Pacific. And then, of course, it's a big circle. So he comes around this way. He makes it into Southeast Asia through the Canaries and all of that, or not the Canaries, through just like the Philippines, etc. Bypasses Australia completely, comes back around. Here's where the Good Hope, where they talk about that strait, and then up and around. Okay. So he did not make this final portion of it, but his crew made this final portion. That's why he's kind of given the idea of, oh, Magellan made it. Okay. All right. So which of the following are not considered part of the old world? Yep. America was not part of the old world. Good. Oh, look at this. My king is just going fast. Who was the last Aztec emperor? And that is Atahualpa. And then who was the first European explorer? India by sea. And Montezuma. Oh, that's right. Montezuma, he was the Aztec, wasn't he? That's right. The other dude was the Inca. See, even I get those two mixed up. And Vasco da Gama. There you go. All right. Do we have all of these? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we're all good. We can move and look at cultural diffusion. Actually, before we get any further into here, we've got like 1 minute left of class. So as a reminder, Module 8, Lesson 1, we'll finish this up in class on Wednesday, and it'll be due along with your journal. Your DBQ closes on Friday, so please go look and see what you might have missed and get that taken care of. Module 7 quiz closes tomorrow. Small group meet tomorrow afternoon from 12:30 to 2:30. And then in the announcements, there is a teacher survey. If you guys could please go complete that this week, I would really appreciate it. And I will get today's video up into our agenda for the week. Just as a reminder, it's always in here. So like right here, I will add this in as soon as it loads in. All right. And we are done for the day. If you need any help, I will see you tomorrow in small group meets. Bye, everybody. Yes, Adriel?
I'm looking at the next slide, and I decided to look at the next slide, and I always thought Khan Academy was for math, not other stuff. I always thought Khan Academy was for math.
Oh, no, I mean, Khan Academy was made to help everybody. Like that was the whole point of it. So for us to be able to help you guys, somebody slightly different, saying it in slightly different terms,
I'm just really used to Khan Academy being for math and not.
Oh no, Khan Academy for everything. So yeah, here's where I'm going to put the video is in this week's agenda. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good rest of your day, guys. Head to your next class, guys. Bye, Shakina. You too. Bye, everybody.